Hello and welcome to the 66th episode of Everyday Journal. With me tonight, as usual, are our two GP Atlanta contestants, Bob Wang and Eric Landon. Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going well.
Me too. Going
Eric,
pretty well.
What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? Well, I mean, traveling to Atlanta, so that was a trip. I did that. Other than that, not a whole lot.
You stream any interesting sweet decks, or have you been grizzled branding it up lately again?
I got a 5-0 with a Delver Phoenix deck. I'm not sure how interesting that was, though.
Are you ever going to return to Soul Sisters?
I have not returned to Soul Sisters. Not in a while.
Do we need to pay you to return to Soul Sisters?
That would do it.
Have you played the Hogak deck?
I played a Jund Hogak deck, and I've started playing the bug one today. There was Magic Online went down, and my first match took 40 minutes because my opponent was playing very slow, so I only made it through three matches with bug. So I played Jund, and I've played some bug. So yeah, I've played the Hogak decks.
Do you have any thoughts on it?
Kinda, yeah. I'm not super impressed by it. I don't think it has I think it has a worse game one against the field than Reanimator does. It's as weak to Leyline of the Void as Reanimator is, and
well, so against Leyline of the Void, you can sometimes win with Shady Creatures, and also you get to play Force of Vigor, so that's the main reason that it's better against Leyline.
But I don't think that that's true, because in my Reanimator list I have 7 answers to Leyline, and I can also play my creatures with Dark Rituals, so I'm not sure that you're actually winning with 2/2s more often than you are hard casting a Dark Ritual, and I don't think you're winning with 3 Force of Vigors and 3 Reverent Silences more than you are winning with your 7 answers to Leyline. So I don't actually think it's better against Leyline. I think it's probably a little either the same or a little bit worse, and it's a little bit better against Surgical, but again, I'm not my win percentage against blue decks is very high, so I don't think Reanimator's particularly weak against Surgical.
How often does it actually come up that you get to hardcast your creatures with Dark Ritual? Because I know that in the past you also played, what's it called, Lake of the Dead, and that sometimes enabled Grave Titan, and sometimes I guess even Grizzlebrand. Is that still a thing?
You could, yeah. I mean, I'm not playing Lake of the Dead anymore. I've decided that instead of playing a Lake of the Dead and Grave Titans, I just went up to more answers to Leyline of the Void and found that to be a little bit better. But hardcasting Grizzlebrand comes up fairly often.
I still believe that this whole Lake of the Dead thing was like a pump and dump scheme. And now you're super rich and you're lol.
No.
Lake of the Dead, come on.
Well, so Eric and I, we bought Lake of the Deads a while ago because we were both playing the Reanimator Depths deck. This was over a year ago. And then we were playing it and thought it was pretty good, but then it actually did spike. Unfortunately, we didn't sell it when it was $50, and now it's $20.
Yeah.
So what's the next big deck that's actually coming down that's not really as good as advertised?
Well, there's a couple cards. I think I've looked at the reserve list, and I'm like, why is this card not more expensive? I think the highest one on that list is probably Eldraine. Let me just double check the price, but it's a semi-playable legacy deck, and for whatever reason, it's on the reserve list, but it's still really cheap. It's $30, it looks like. But if it ever top 8's a GP, and I think it has top 8 GPs in Seattle, not that long ago. And I know a certain Japanese player called Otaba has been playing it a lot on Magic Online, and I played against it twice the other day when I streamed a league with Once Upon a Time Depths, which we can talk about later. But yeah, I think it's a deck that's legacy playable. I don't think it's good, but it might be good in the future, and I think it's a card that should be worth more.
It's kind of funny. Eldraine is the kind of card that people have been talking about, I think, for 3 or 4 years. And there have been buyouts for 6 hours, and then it returned to the market. It didn't really spike at all. But it's a reserve list card, and it's legacy playable, even though not in a top tier deck. But it shows up every now and then. Can certainly easily 5-hour league, given the right circumstances. So yeah, maybe we should all be sitting on a couple of Eldraines now.
I think that deck was actually pretty good when Deathrite Shaman is around, and then the dedicated Eldraine players have struggled to find a build that's even playable until recently, and I think that, the most recent builds look playable at the very least.
You know which reserved list card I have been looking into for almost 10 years now, wondering whether it will ever spike? It's a card that nobody ever plays that I thought might take off in lands, because it's not a legendary land, so you can play multiple, and that's Halls of Mist. I wouldn't expect you guys to know what it does.
What does it do?
It basically says that creatures can only ever attack every other turn. So creatures that attack during the controller's last turn can't attack.
Does it tap for mana?
No, it doesn't tap for mana. It has cumulative upkeep 1. So you would eventually have to like kill it and replay it. It's not super bad. It's like a bad Maze of It.
No, it sounds like a horrible Glacial Chasm. Like,
yeah, it sounds pretty bad.
Also, lands decks aren't even playing Glacial Chasm anymore. Like, they stopped playing that card.
That's true. And they often don't even play the full playset of Maze of It. Yeah, but it's just like, it's a reserved list card that's not entirely unplayable. I guess it's pretty bad, but it's only like $1.60 or something right now. But it's just my pet card that I feel one day it shall arise and Wizards make an awful mistake with it. But yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Something that happened is GP Atlanta this weekend. You guys both attended. Bob, let's start with you. How did your weekend go? You had some unpleasant experiences. I guess that's a longer story. Most listeners would probably be familiar with it, but let's go ahead with that.
Sure. Yeah, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. So I was disqualified from the main event of Atlanta. Overall, in terms of like Magic that weekend, I actually did pretty well. I played slow depths with sideboard Tarmogoyf, and I went like 11-3 in the matches that I finished. Also, just a minor note, GP Atlanta was 2 weekends ago, so a little bit of time has passed, and I've had some time to kind of reflect and think about it, and I have posted about it on Twitter, but essentially what happened was I was 5-0 and up a game in the mirror, and if you haven't played the Depths Mirror before, it's actually pretty interesting. Like, if you ever play like the wrong land at any point, you just instantly lose, so it's pretty skill intensive. I felt like I had a good chance of winning that match and like making it to 6-0. And it's funny because the guy who I got paired against, who I was DQ'd, he actually went on to play Cyrus the next round. So I probably would have lost to Cyrus given how hot he was running, and also the matchup is good for him, I think. But yeah, so I was running really well, and I even like called the shot on Twitter that I was going to go 9-0. So I like started tweeting about it, and I just felt really good about my list because I basically tuned the deck to be good against Crop Rotation Caracas post sideboard. I was bringing in Tarmogoyfs against Delver, and like they would have all these awkward cards like Vapor Snag, and then I would just like kill them with Tarmogoyfs basically. So I felt really good about the deck. Unfortunately, we had a deck check, and they asked if I wanted to like accompany them for the deck check because that's what they do at GPs now. I know one of my friends, Michael Clifford, had a different story where they didn't ask him to accompany him, but from what I talked to from all of my friends, whenever there's a deck check now, you are allowed to join the judge as they conduct the deck check.
Yeah, I experienced that several times, actually several years ago in Europe, where when people started having really expensive legacy and vintage decks, they would ask the judge whether they could come with them, and the judge has never turned them down. So I guess that's a thing, but people are just more aware of it now.
No, so that's different. This time, it was literally the judge asking both of us if we wanted to join them. Like, it wasn't like we asked. It was like the judge proactively asked. So I think that's the new policy. Perhaps it's only for Legacy. I'm not sure. But they did ask. Both of us declined because we thought it would be a routine deck check. I basically thought it was going to go as normal. So we wait. It's a pretty long deck check, and eventually I get called over to the judges table, and then the head judge starts asking me questions. Basically, like, he was asking me, do I sort my deck while I sleeve it? And I said no, because I don't. I just pick up the cards and start sleeving. I never sort it beforehand. And it turns out that's actually like the correct way to sleeve your deck, because if you sort your deck before sleeving, it like greatly increases the chances of you marking your cards. And so what happened with my deck was the sleeves were marked in like an extremely subtle way, and in such a subtle fashion that like after they showed me they were marked, I still couldn't. I agree that they were marked, but I would not be able to show you how they were marked because it was 2 sets of Dragon Shield matte blacks, and they're 100% identical from the top. The judges agreed with that. However, from the side, they had a different glare when you stared at it in the sun. So there was like basically one of them reflected light more than the other one. So if you looked at it from the side, it would look like, some cards were more reflective. And hypothetically, how you could cheat with this is like, say you split it into lands and spells, which is how the deck was split. If you knew the top card of your deck was a land, then you could like fetch to get rid of it if you didn't want a land, or vice versa. But actually, one of my friends pointed out afterwards to me that in a deck like Slow Depths, your lands basically are spells. So it almost made no sense for me to mark my cards this way, because half the time I really want to draw like a Dark Depths or a Thespian Stage.
So basically you're saying the potential from abuse was rather minimal compared to other decks.
Yeah, I mean, in a blue deck, it would be more abusable, let's just say. And obviously I didn't cheat, so But, if I had cheated, it would have probably made sense to like mark crop rotation, dark depths, hex mage, like stuff like that instead. But anyways, basically the judge was asking me questions and was like, how do you think these cards were marked? And I was like, I have no idea. Oh, the other thing too is like, well, so there was a pattern. However, I'm not convinced that I could even so the judge was able to pick up my deck and then pick out which ones were lands when the deck was in his hand. And if the cards were in the middle of the deck, he could take them out. So they were clearly marked. However, I don't know if the judge would have been able to tell if the top card was a land or a spell. Because like I said, you could only tell from the side. And I don't even know if you could tell if the top card was marked or not. Because they were just so similar, and it was the glare that was different. But anyways, the judge was asking me, like, how do you think these cards came to be marked? And I was like, I honestly have zero idea. I was like, they were like, well, you don't think you sorted it? I was like, yeah, I don't think I sorted it. And so then they're like, well, there's no reasonable explanation. The only possible explanation is you cheated or you got, like, super unlucky. But based on the evidence, we're going to say that you cheated and you're getting disqualified. And I was like, okay. And I was like, while this was happening, I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. I'm like so unbelievably unlucky that I like sleeved my deck and then they just happened to be marked. It was just like, I was literally thinking in my head, like, who touched my deck? And like, I was just like searching for an explanation in my head, like how this possibly could have happened. And I probably should have thought about it harder because, so this was on Saturday of the GP. And it turns out that my friends had sleeved my deck for me on Tuesday, and I just like had forgotten. I had played with these marked cards during the Friday PTQ, but I wasn't deck checked, and so like nobody knew for the better. So basically, I was playing with these marked cards all week, really, while I was like testing for it too. And essentially, what had happened is my friends had sleeved my deck for me. Basically, we just my friends who were staying with me, Rugvet and Rosemary, had stayed with me since before the weekend prior for SCG Syracuse. So they'd been at my house all week, and we'd been testing resleeving decks. So I had like 300 sleeves just open on my table next to my couch. And so Rosemary was sleeving from my couch, whereas my other friend was sitting at my computer desk, and then he picked up a different pack of sleeves and was sleeving from there. And he remembers sorting the cards so that it was like, lands and spells. And so one of them basically picked up lands and one of them picked up spells, and then they sleeved the deck. And it's pretty close to even too, because I play like 28 lands. So essentially that's how it happened. But because the judge DQ'd me, then my friend came over and was like, Bob, I sleeved your deck. And I was like, oh my God, like I just smacked myself in the head. I was like, how did I forget that? Because like, honestly, I've never had someone... I mean, I think I've had friends help sleeve your deck. When you start before the tournament, you're like, oh, help me sleeve. But, like, we did this so far in advance, and it was because, like, I was testing on Moto Tuesday night, and you know how you're, like, when you're playing a video game or playing Magic Online, you're just completely zoned in and you don't remember anything, like, or you don't focus on the things around you. So they were, like...
Autopilot.
Yeah, exactly. So I was, like, busy thinking about my match, and they were sleeving the deck for me because we were going to test the deck in paper, so... Honestly, it was a really frustrating situation. I learned a couple lessons. The main one is like, obviously, I mean, there's a couple really important lessons. One is, think about when you sleeve your deck and make sure you sleeve from the same pack of sleeves so that like the cards aren't marked. The other thing to do is to shuffle your deck and shuffle the sleeves so that if there is a marking, it's going to be completely random. And then if there is a random marking, it'll either be no penalty or it'll be a game loss. It will not be a disqualification. And then the other thing too was just like the head judge was like trying to like almost help me out. He was like, well, how do you think these cards were marked? And I had no idea. So I said I had no idea. If I was able to, remember that I didn't sleeve my deck, then I think there's a good chance I would not have been disqualified. So I don't know, some lessons learned. I think it's funny because I think Anurag gets the last laugh because he resleeves between like every 3 rounds. He like spends an absurd amount of money on sleeves.
How does he have time?
Literally for the GP, he resleeved 3 times in one day. I'm just like, Anurag, you're crazy. And I always make fun of him for it, but then it turns out his way was way better than mine because he's never going to get DQ'd for his sleeves.
Yeah, but that's like, how do you call it? Like a compulsive disorder almost?
He just says that like
4 packs of sleeves in a day 2 event.
He just says that like every time he re-sleeves, the shuffle feels much cleaner, which, like, I guess I can't argue with that, but it's kind of like a little habit he has that I make fun of him for, but I think he got the last left in the end because I got DQ'd and he went 11-4, so...
I mean, I remember Anorak told a story right in the aftermath of your DQ. I think it was on a stream where he talked about when, like, you two guys used to live together, and you had sleeves all over your apartment, and you would just like randomly go around and pick up sleeves from Anorak's desk or anywhere and sleeve things. So I imagine this place where it's literally sleeves coming out of the fridge or coming out of the cupboard.
No, honestly, I'm like the classic cheap Asian. I like try not to spend money on things, and so like there have been 2-day events that I've just used really ratty sleeves, and like I just use old sleeves all the time, and it's not something I pay attention to. And I finally got punished for it, so I've learned my lesson, basically. I'm just going to use, like, the same pack of sleeves that are fresh, so that this doesn't happen again.
So, Eric, which kind of sleeves do you play?
I used KMC for a very long time, and I noticed basically what happened to Bob. I noticed what happened because me and a friend would share cards, and we would just double sleeve everything in the exact same brand and color of sleeve, so that way if a sleeve got damaged or you wanted to move cards from deck to deck, then you could just have everything in the same sleeves and that would work. And then I'd start to notice that from the side, like some of the sleeves would be a different color or it'd be more shiny basically. So and then I would like be able to pull those cards out, and sometimes they would be like a playset of Brainstorms or something, and I'd be like, okay, so I have to at least check my decks every time to see if there's like a shiny playset of Brainstorms, even though the sleeves are supposed to be the same. They're not. But then the last time I was at a Cardmarket, whatever that thing's called in Europe, I won some, I think they call them katanas now. They were not called katanas back then, but I think they're the same as katanas, and I have some decks sleeved in those, and those seem to last forever, so I really like those sleeves.
Oh, you do? Katanas, I don't know. I never really got behind them. But so yeah, for me, that's the only thing that I was like taught from the very beginning, and that's really just something I picked up from other more experienced players. Once I got to big tournaments, that you literally buy a pack of sleeves on the day you play and re-sleeve your deck either like right before the tournament or the night before the tournament. I'm usually quite the slacker. Like I write my deck list right before the tournament, but when it comes to sleeves, that's the only thing I guess I get right. But yeah, I can totally like see the appeal of basically having like all KMC matte black, so you can whenever you need someone, you just like grab them from anywhere. But yeah. I guess that's something to remember for the future.
Yeah, no, I even noticed some. I guess if you don't sort your cards when you sleeve, then it doesn't matter as long as you're not pulling out like play sets from one pack, and then, you know what I mean. Like as long as things aren't sorted, then those shiny edges shouldn't matter that much. But it is kind of. Also because the sleeve packs they don't come in packs of 75, a lot of them. Like the KMCs came in 100 packs, so there'd always be like a few left over, and you leave them in your pack or in your bag for if something gets damaged and you can re-sleeve, and then there'll be like 20 left or 10 left, and then you start to sleeve another, and it's like you don't want to throw away a bunch of sleeves. So yeah, I don't know. I've noticed it as well. Actually, when I heard that and I saw the picture, I knew exactly what had happened.
Yeah, something that I often notice, like a lot of people posted their sleeves in response to Bob's tweet to show like how their deck sometimes looks when they use different packs of sleeves of the same manufacturer. Something that I often notice is that the side part often sticks out. Like if you play your sleeves over say like 3, 4, 5 tournaments and it's heavy use, you shuffle a lot. I often feel if you look at the main deck and you look at the side part, it really sticks out, and that's something that's also problematic. That's a major reason why I really like re-sleeving before big tournaments. Like you would probably like get really poor if you did it before every, I guess if you have Legacy FNM or like all those minor tournaments. Mm-hmm. And then there's Anorak, I guess.
Yeah. Well, no, actually,
I can't believe that.
Julian, you bring up a really good point. And actually, during the top 8 of an Open, when I was playing Grishel Brand, I was playing against Jeff Hoogland, and he actually got a game loss for his sideboard being less worn, essentially, than his main deck. So that's like something to be aware of as well. I think, like you were saying earlier, if you have some glare marked cards, you can still get a game loss if it's random. So I would say still be very careful. Obviously, you don't want a game loss, even if it's not as bad as a DQ. And then the other thing I would say is that if you're going to play the same sleeves for a 2-day event and you don't want to have that problem, I would suggest after like maybe every 4 or 5 rounds, resleeving your sideboard into your main deck sleeves and vice versa. So that way, like, they're all the same amount of worn.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. I never thought about that. That actually sounds pretty good. Or you could pull a Valentin Muckel and just play without any sleeves at all until the judges in round 9 come to you and they're like, dude, what are you doing? And his explanation was, I am crazy. And they accepted that.
Wait. This is not limited? This is like...
Well, it was actually, was it standard? I think it was limited, and he didn't want to play with sleeves, even though he was like sponsored by the MTG Madness back then. He could have easily gotten sleeves. He literally just wanted to play without sleeves on the first day, and then they made him play with sleeves for the second day.
I don't think they actually have a rule that forces you to play with sleeves, but they should definitely add one.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a basic thing, especially in Legacy. Like in most constructed formats, nobody would ever play without sleeves, right?
Just imagine playing a Legacy deck without sleeves, even like disregarding the money, but just like every card will be marked, right? Like
those cards are older than most of the players these days, especially the dual lands. But yeah, so Bob, what did you get to play on Sunday as well? I think you mentioned that you wanted to crush the MCQ they had there.
Yeah, well, they're back to PTQs again, but I did go 5-1 on the first Friday PTQ to win 2 buys, and then I went basically 5-0, but with 2 buys I went 3-0, and then on the last day I went 3-2. So the deck was overall 11-3 on the weekend, which is I think very good. And now I'm excited to kind of test the next iteration, which will be we're going to talk about Throne of Eldraine spoils later, but I'm excited to try some Throne cards for Dark Depths.
Do you have like an experimental deck list that I can post in the show notes so people can check that out?
Yeah, sure. I can send you what I streamed with the other day.
Awesome. I'm going to put it in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, head to itsjulian.com and then it's going to be in the show notes for this post. So Eric, how was worshipping Griselbrand this weekend? I'm pretty sure I remember you playing Black Red Reanimator, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I did. It was good. The deck is really good. That's why I keep playing it. At a GP, I kind of like having a lot of downtime between rounds, so that also is pretty good. But like in an MCQ or whatever, or at F&M, I don't know. I often like playing blue decks where I'm not like sitting around doing nothing in between rounds. But anyway, regardless of that, I chose to play Reanimator because I thought it was the best bet. I actually was considering playing Rug Delver, but decided that I thought my Delver matchup was as good, if not better, with Reanimator. And my matchups with Reanimator against everything else were as good, if not better. So I decided to play Reanimator, and I ended up, I got buys in the PTQ, but I didn't top 8 the PTQ. I got X and 1, with my last round being a concession because my opponent had buys, so that was nice. And then in the main event, it was my first time playing in a large event with 2 buys and a GP with 2 buys. So that was pretty sweet. Starting out at 2-0 for the first time. Like I've done pretty well in GPs, but never starting out 2-0. So by round 5, when I was 5-0 after only playing 3 rounds, it felt like kind of like cheating. I ended up day 1. I ended up X-2 with my second loss being in the final round to Hans Jacob Godek,
yeah.
I think is. Yeah, it was a heartbreaker because I was I think after turn 2 I was like 98% to win that game. And then managed to... It was one of those games that you're almost certain to win.
What was he playing? Like Hans has made a name for himself playing Delver all over Europe. I think he actually won the North American Eternal Weekend as well.
He was playing Miracles.
What? Okay.
Yeah, so the game 3 was I mulled to 5, and I had a turn 1 with Chancellor backup, so I got Griselbrand on turn 1 through his Surgical, and he was kind of like shocked and a little bit like, what the hell? Like, yeah. Was that really your hand? And I actually mulled... Both my 7 and my 6 were turn 1s as well, but they were unprotected, and I know against Miracles I need a protected hand, either on turn 1 or turn 2 to win. And I got the Griselbrand, and he swordsed it, and then I got a Chancellor, and then he was hellbent, and I got him down to 5 life, and he ripped the top. Oops. He ripped the top card of his deck was the Swords to Plowshare, so he was able to kill it. And I have 3 lootings in my graveyard and 5 lands, so I'm like, whatever, I'm still like 90 whatever percent to win, and I just all 3 of my lootings bricked, and he found a rest in peace in adjacent.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. You literally got the turn 1 Griselbrand, but you couldn't get there against Miracles. So what's the next step usually? Because I recently played the deck as well on Magic Online just for fun again, And I also noticed that against most decks, like Griselbrand is the first step, and then usually you're either trying to get Elishnorn or, I mean, against most decks, Griselbrand does it because of the extra discard and stuff. But against Miracles,
you're looking for Iona or Griselbrand to go with. Iona on white and Archetype of Endurance is just game over against Miracles, so that's what you're looking for. But I had a Chancellor, and he didn't really have much going on. So yeah, I mean, reanimating Griselbrand and drawing 7 is not game over against Miracles because they can just sword your Griselbrand. So you're only drawing 7. So there's a chance that you're like not going to be able to do much, especially if you use your whole hand like I did, which means I don't get to discard a creature into my graveyard on turn.
Oh, so you didn't go ahead on the first turn and draw 14, because that's what I would have like blindly done, just to get some more unmasks and maybe tear the hand apart.
I mean, that would be wonderful, but like I said, I was using reanimate.
Oh,
so
you said, yeah, sorry,
you
mentioned that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
no, if you draw 14, you can't really lose, but when you draw 7, you can.
So you entered the second day at X and 2, and how was your performance on the second day?
Second day, my first loss of the day was to Death and Taxes, which is pretty unfortunate because it's a good matchup. And I can't remember off the top of my head what my fourth loss was, but I ended up X and 4 I got 36th place. So yeah, with one good matchup I lost, and the pretty bad luck against Hans Jacob with that one game. It was a great match though against him. We had 3 pretty.
What was your first loss?
He's a pretty fun guy.
So that was kind of. My first loss was to Michael Braverman on Rug Delver. So I actually beat Delver 5 times over the weekend and lost to it once, which I'm pretty happy with because, like I said, my main consideration was, would I rather play a Delver Mirror or Reanimator against Delver, and I decided Reanimator against Delver was probably better.
Yeah, also you've got an image to maintain, right? You're the black-red Reanimator guy.
I mean, kind of, but I really care about winning more than about the deck itself. I just play it because, yeah.
Does it mean that you're not going to play black-red Reanimator in the Legacy Premier League?
Well, I'm having the same discussion in my head right now. Like, that's why I played Hogak today, because I looked at my pool and I'm thinking, should I metagame or should I play the deck that I have the best win rate with, even though they're all going to put me on Reanimator, but it's not going to matter because it's open deck list. So I'm considering. I'm not going to play Hogak, though. I don't think that deck is.
I think you should definitely metagame, especially in a smaller tournament. Which, yeah, by the way, let's talk a little bit about the Legacy Premier League this year. Julian, you did like an amazing job with the kind of the trailer and like getting all the different players to come. Like, I'm so excited for this year. Like, the production value already looks insane.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like, a major reason I was able to do this is because we got some like serious sponsorship from Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe. And we're also doing this together with Liquipedia, which is, if you don't know, that Team Liquid of esports fame has this basically esports wiki, and we're being covered on there. And we got Anurag and I are producing this, and we got so much support from these people that I was able to put together all these graphics and animations. Like, if you haven't seen the trailer yet, definitely check it out. I would go as far as to say it's one of the coolest things I've ever produced, and yeah.
And week 1 starts on Wednesday, so just 2 days from now.
Yeah, on my actual birthday. Like, we finished last season on October 2nd, 2018, and exactly 1 year later, we're gonna kick it off again with Andrea Mangucci, Cyrus Common-Gill, Emma Handy, and Jarvis Yu. So that's definitely gonna be a stacked group. Whom do you see advancing from there? It's actually probably really hard to pick.
Ooh, okay, hold on. So Gucci, Jarvis, Emma, and who's the last one?
Cyrus.
I think I have to go with Jarvis. He has the widest range, and I trust him to pick kind of a good deck. I think in these small groups, you definitely do want a metagame, but the downside to metagaming is, like, say you pick a deck that you're like not super familiar with, and then your opponents pick decks that, like, you know, you didn't expect, then you could be left with nothing. But it'll be interesting, because I know last year we tried to keep what group you were in secret, so it was harder to metagame. So this year will be interesting. We'll see if it like becomes more metagamey or not.
Yeah, I remember when Bob actually, I'm still talking about this today, when Bob submitted Burn, but then the Sense Dividing Top ban happened and we allowed people to resubmit. That was 2 years ago. I still wanted to see you play Burn. I mean,
I had 4 Exquisite Firecraft main just to beat Anurag, and it seems like I was onto something because the Burn player who top 8'd the GP also had 4 Firecraft main.
Yeah, he took out Jarvis in the quarterfinals, and from what Jarvis told me, it wasn't even close, apparently. But yeah, you pick Jarvis 2 at once, but you still gotta pick a second one. I mean, it's super hard, right? It's basically rolling the die, whether it's Andrea, Cyrus, or Emma.
Gotta go with my friend Cyrus. He just won a GP, so you know.
Yeah, how can you not pick the well, I was gonna say hottest Magic player right now, and what I mean by that is like hottest running Magic player. Yeah. Anyway,
or both, really.
Yeah, probably, right? Who knows? But Andrea is also really, really good. Like, I haven't really... Usually people see Andrea when he's playing for his legacy videos on Channel Fireball. And most of that is for entertainment value, and it's great and it's fun. But when Andrea plays serious legacy, and like the only real time I saw him was an Eternal Weekend in Europe in, I think, 2017. I saw him playing Death and Taxes, and he was so on spot. He was actually menacing. He played against an Elves player, and the Elves player almost felt like scared of Andrea because Andrea like literally made no mistake playing Death and Taxes. So when Andrea really wants to do well, he does well. I mean, I think last season he submitted Goblins for the group stage, so I don't know about that. But I only know when one of the players is playing, so I'm not gonna disclose.
Well, I think also more is at stake this year. Like you said, we got sponsorship from Wizards of the Coast, so I think maybe with more prizes at stake, people will try harder to win. So. I'm just excited to see kind of what happens.
Yeah, how do you feel about your group? You're up against Autumn Pachet, Phil Gallagher, and Javier Dominguez.
I mean, I think every group is just insanely stacked, so I don't think my group is like easier or harder than any other group. So I'm excited just to battle.
Yeah, there were people on Reddit talking about the quote-unquote group of death, but it's really like, I look at any of those groups and I don't want to be in any of them, pretty much. Eric, which one? Oh, actually, we are sharing a group, right? We're both in Group C, playing on October 16th against Brian Gottlieb of the Arena Decklist podcasts and Edgar Magalesh. Am I pronouncing his name? Magash? Okay, cool.
Wait, so are you guys going to metagame it against each other? You're going to play like Elish Norn main, and then you're going to play like Leyline main to counter that? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to play Rip Helm or something, or I don't know, or Iggy Pop. And then Eric is going to go turn 1 Curse Catcher. I can definitely see it. But yeah, it's going to be fun.
I mean, Merfolk is on my radar.
Merfolk is my third most played deck in my history of Legacy.
Wow, that's wild. So you go like Maverick, Elves, Merfolk?
No, Elves is by far, like, I played something like 700 sanctioned matches with Elves, and then there's like 100-something Miracles, and I think Merfolk and Maverick are pretty close, actually.
Got it.
Actually, Maverick could be in third. But yeah, that's the Legacy Premier League. Definitely check it out. It's going to be streamed on Twitch TV/itsjulian at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Anorak is going to do streaming for us. That's going to be really, really great, and I'm really looking forward to this. And starting with the playoff stage, and basically October 30th, we are going to have, you guys called it like a madness, right? Like you have March Madness. We're going to have the Legacy Madness where you can predict the bracket. And if you get a good prediction for the bracket, you can actually win insane prizes.
So what did the first place prize for the bracket win last year?
Last year, the winner got something like, oh, let me lie. See, I'm actually not sure. I would have to check, but it was was it like 100 or 200 tickets? Like we had a master prize for the person who got everything perfectly, but
that's never going to happen though. Like the chance of getting a perfect bracket is like 0.01%. There's something ludicrously small.
Yeah, we had like a drop of honey, and we had a foil Mercadian Masks brainstorm, and I think 1,000 tickets and card holder credit, but nobody managed to crack that. Yeah, the odds are really, really small. But yeah, there's still going to be great prizes. And I know the person who actually got the perfect bracket last year, they actually used that money to buy Black Red Reanimator online. And I think they're also subscribed to Eric's Patreon now. And they're like, they haven't played Magic Online, but now they're really into Magic Online because of that one. And that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
And on top of that, we also have a special prize for the person who submits the worst bracket, like the person who literally gets none of the matches correct.
I imagine that's easier to do.
Yeah, you would think, but there's still like something like 8 coin flips that you have to hit perfectly. Last year we didn't get anyone who didn't get any match correctly.
Okay, I might submit my bracket to try and get that prize.
Well, yeah, you can submit your bracket, but you're not eligible for the bracket because you're a contestant.
Okay, that's fair. That's probably a good reason.
Oh, wow. I was listening to this podcast about sports criminals, and I talked about this guy, Pete Rose, that I never heard of, but apparently he's like really good in baseball, and he's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame because he like did bets on his own games and stuff. That's what I could remember. Is that like a name that Americans know, Pete Rose?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure, but yeah, apparently that's like a really big thing. So Bob could be the next Pete Rose.
I mean, I've gotten started early with my Pithing Needle Grizzlebrand and now getting DQ'd, so... Or Borborygmos.
Yeah. That's a different kind of story, right? But they literally changed the rules because of that incident, from what I remember.
Did they?
They changed the rules. They changed the rules for the Borborygmos incident.
So what did they change the rules to?
So previously, you had to uniquely identify a card, which my opponent did by naming Borborygmos. Now the rule is... I'm not sure what the rule is, but essentially it's like... It has to be 100% clear in both players' mind, like what card is named, and if it's at all unclear, like you're supposed to clarify it. So that's basically the rule now. Is so you can't mess up with Pithing Needle.
So wait, but how would you know that in the case of Borborygmos, how would you know that your opponent and you have a different idea?
Because there's only one that they've seen in my deck. We have both had access to lists, so. Yeah, it's funny. So that was my opponent, Brad Carpenter, but I've like since teamed with him and we're on like pretty good terms now. But the internet thinks we hate each other or something. But yeah, it is what it is.
If you guys hate each other on camera, you can actually like make something out of that. Isn't that what?
His Twitter handle is Brad Borborygmos. So he's literally made it his brand. So I helped him out basically.
That's nice of you. But yeah, the way I know it right now is basically like if there's really no reasonable doubt about which card was mentioned, then it's quite clear. I think something similar would probably happen with somebody named Urborg, and they actually mean Urborg, Tomb of Chugmouth, unless it's maybe like a, I don't know, old school event where Urborg is actually a card.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that. Let's talk a little bit more about the current state of Legacy right now. We're gonna touch on the cards that have made a splash from Throne of Eldraine. But before that, there's a pretty thorough analysis that Channel Fireball has put out of the metagame of GP Atlanta. And the thing that's like stuck out to me the most was that no bad cards, Rug Delver, NBC Rug Delver, that it actually went from being the most played deck on day one at 12% to actually 17% on day two. So it looks like the deck has had a really good performance. I mean, nobody really was surprised by that, but it's still nice to see that backed up, that almost every fifth deck in day two was NBC Rug Delver. How do you guys feel about that? Is that something that you think that's here to stay? Or, I mean, the deck does have some decks it's not really great against. I know that Jarvis mentioned that, for example, the Hogak Depth, not Hogak Depth, but the Hogak deck is a deck that's decent against them. Storm is probably also, like, especially in the first game, it's rough for them, even though Jarvis mentioned that he feels confident in that matchup. Are there any upcoming changes for you guys?
I mean, I think No Bad Cards Rug Delver is clearly the quote-unquote best deck. However, I think it is significantly worse than Top Miracles or Deathrite Shaman Grixis Delver by a good amount. No Bad Cards Rug Delver doesn't have too many significant holes, but it is like really, really bad against combo game 1. And it's pretty soft to the graveyard decks in general. However, I do know one of the Legacy PTQ winners ended up winning the PTQ with Rug Delver with 4 Leyline of the Void in the sideboard. So that card is also really good against Knight of the Reliquary, which can also be good against Rug Delver. So I'm interested to see if kind of main sideboard Leyline of the Void becomes more of a fixture in these blue decks. Because I know a Grixis control player also top-8'd that PTQ with 4 Leyline of the Voids. So I'm interested to see if that's going to be the next trend. Because I think the graveyard decks are a really good way of attacking Rug Delver. I just think Rug Delver, like, I tried the deck myself, and I found you were kind of ahead against everything, and you could, like, play very well. The power level of your cards was very high. But at the same time, like, you just become more and more inbred trying to beat the mirror. For instance, Jarvis said he wanted to play, like, 3 Submergers in the sideboard. Okay, but then you get faced against something like Blue-Red Delver, or Death's Shadow, who has Submerge against you, and then you have like this dead card in your sideboard. You don't have any removal spells. So I think like it gets to a certain point where like the metagame gets too inbred to be geared against Rug Delver. So I don't really see it putting sustained dominant performances in the future. We'll see if I'm proven wrong, but I think the deck is a very good deck, but I don't see it being an absolutely dominant deck in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. The deck is obviously very good, and I played it quite a bit, and it has some pretty nutty draws and can do a lot, but the mirror is pretty miserable, and it is weak to a lot of fringier decks. Like the Hogak deck is, I I would still call it a fringe deck. I mean, the person who top-8'd the SCG also top-8'd the
Already?
GP.
That's the same. Oh, okay, let's actually give them a shout-out then.
Yeah.
Tarek Patel. I talked with him about the deck. So he put in the work and basically made a great deck, and he gave it to his friend Catlight, who also top-8'd a PTQ with it. So I think the deck definitely is worth exploring. I was thinking about trying like maybe 1 or 2 Lotus Petals in it just to give it a little bit of extra speed. But from what I can tell, the deck is definitely here to stay, and we'll see how it kind of adapts to hate.
That's basically the Hogak deck that also plays 4 Hedron Crab to mill itself.
That's basically the main innovation.
So people listening are probably wondering, well, then what is Rug good against? That's one of the questions that will come up, because we're saying it's bad against, or I'm saying it's bad against fringe decks. You're saying it's bad against graveyard decks. And when I say fringe decks, I'm talking about Hogak, Merfolk, humans, those kind, and Death and Taxes as almost a fringe deck at this point. I guess not. It was played quite a bit at the GP, but I think Rug is not particularly good against those. The thing that I think Rug is good against is anything that Wasteland and Daze is good against. And the reason that it is a strong deck is because Wasteland and Daze can be good against any of those decks that are bad matchups.
I think like Eldrazi Post is a good example of a card of a deck that is just going to be good against, kind of.
Yeah, it's just mid-rangey enough to be good against aggressive decks, but also aggressive enough to be good against very deep late-game decks like the Eldrazi Post decks. And like most of the time when Rug was good in Legacy, which I guess is the longest dominating streak in Legacy, I guess there's Miracles up there too. It made a name for itself by being the quote-unquote 55% deck against the field, which had decent matchups against most of the decks, except for like a couple of outliers, and then people really appreciated getting to actually play Magic in most of those scenarios. So I feel like it's kind of similar today. Back in the day, people said like 9% is the highest any dominant Legacy deck will ever get. Now this one had 12%, which isn't too far off. I guess it's 33% higher, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
So anything else that we see in those numbers, like Brewer Delver has had a decent showing. Not really too surprised by that. And then judging by the numbers that Channel Fireball provided, they call it Stoneforge, which is both any Blade deck as well as Death and Taxes, is only 10%. They said it was pretty much split 50-50 between those two. So Death and Taxes really only hit 5% in the GP, which is kind of disappointing considering that for most of the last years, it was one of the 3 most played decks, I want to say. But yeah, just like all those other mid-range decks like Avs and Merrick, it can't really fight or play with the big boys these days. That's just something that's the current status quo, I feel like. I'm also a little bit lost. We talked about this before the cast when I mentioned that I'm going to Beijing Orlov at the beginning of November and GP Atlanta by the end of the month. I'm totally lost what to play. I even feel like I want to pick up Storm again. I have played my fair share of Storm in the past. Obviously, that's like almost 10 years ago, but I'm feeling kind of drawn to it, maybe because there's just so many great resources. And by that, I mean Cyrus and all his guides. Maybe that's something I'm going to do in the future. But yeah, I'm lost. I don't really know what to do in the format right now. But I'll figure it out from here, I guess. Because I don't really expect any bans anytime soon. Or how do you guys?
Have you tried Humans?
Yeah, no.
I think Humans is potentially the best tribe right now. I think that deck is quite good.
It could actually be. Like, I've seen Humans do some good things on Magic Online.
It's still bad against Plague Engineer, in case you were wondering.
It's not that bad against Plague Engineer.
I mean, not that bad is definitely relative. Like, yeah, there are decks that are worse against Plague Engineer, but it's still really bad against it. I mean, there's certain board states, right? Like, I played on stream against Humans, and I went turn 1, Reclaimer, turn 2, Tarmogoyf, turn 3, Plague Engineer, and...
Well, they also didn't play around it. You saw their hand. They could have played around it, and then your Plague Engineer wouldn't have done anything. I was watching that. They could have played the 2-drop, and then your Plague Engineer wouldn't have done anything. Instead, they just played out all 3 of their X1s.
Yeah, I mean, there is play to it, sure. I don't remember if they actually had Thalia's Lieutenant or not. No, I didn't see their hand. I said I was praying that they didn't play Thalia's Lieutenant. Well, how would I have seen their hand? Because I played a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop.
Because they tutored
Palace Jailer.
Palace Jailer, and then you thought seize them on the next turn. And they had
but they might not have had it at that point. So I don't know.
Well, it was the next turn, so they had to have drawn it for the turn.
But anyway, yeah. Ewan's probably is like too one-dimensional for me, but I'll figure something out from you. Oh god, I'm gonna get a lot of hate from Ewan's.
Yeah, I don't think it's one-dimensional. I think it has like lots of different angles that it
it?
can.
Maybe I should
attack
really try it then.
Yeah.
But what I like about like Elves and Maverick is that you all the time you have all these small things that you can do on your turn, on your opponent's turn, all these small adjustments that you can make.
Oh, Humans definitely has that, especially like it's a little bit more reliant on Ether Vial, but I would describe it as like a Maverick deck, but that also happens to play Meddling Mage main deck, so you're much better against combo.
And Freebooter, yeah, it's got a lot of different angles it can attack from, and then you can go from the attacking your opponent's ability to do things to aggro within like the span of 2 turns. Like, it's pretty cool.
I'm gonna give it a try. Maybe it's gonna be my next big thing. Who knows? Maybe you actually figured me out, and it's the deck I'm gonna submit for the Legacy Premier League.
I mean, I'm considering it, but I'm much more scared of when I'm playing Reanimator. I definitely am more scared of Humans than any other tribe. Merfolk, even with Force of Will, like Humans is the best one.
Huh.
Yeah.
In speaking of other decks, Bob, you actually wanted me to add the Legacy Challenge to our show notes because there have been some interesting results, I guess, from what I see from scrolling through this right now. What sticks out to you?
So I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is 2 players played 2 Mystic Sanctuaries in their blue-white control decks. So there was Worst, who got 10th place. He played 1 Terminus. And then there was I'm actually level 1 in 21st place. They did not play any Terminus, but they basically played like a Jeskai Mentor deck. Wow, their deck is really wild because they not only have 4 Brainstorm, 4 Ponder, 3 Astrolabe, they also have 4 Accumulated Knowledge. So like literally a quarter of their deck just draws cards, and they have Mystic Sanctuary to buy things back. So I think that's like an interesting way to build the deck. I think I would just cut the Astrolabes completely. I do think Accumulated Knowledge Miracles is back on the menu with Mystic Sanctuary because it makes Counterbalance like a much better card. I was playing Sneak and Show against it and Dark Depths against it, and there were just like so many spots where it was like if I didn't kill them by the time they had 3 islands online, it was going to be way harder to win the game. And part of the reason Miracles was, falling out of favor was that Counterbalance was very hit or miss, and this just makes Counterbalance that much more potent.
Yeah, the utility you get out of the card is really outstanding, right? When I saw the card, I almost wanted to throw up because, like, a fetchable Terminus, come on, man. I think we're going to see a lot more of that card in the future.
It's not. You can't fetch a Terminus. You have to have already cast a Terminus.
but like against Delver, they force your Terminus, and then you just Terminus again. Like, that's backbreaking.
Yeah, no, I think the card's all right, but you need 3 lands. I mean, it's
I think of it as a really slow card, but because it turns all of your 8 or 10 fetch lands into tutors, like I think a 2 of is just correct in these blue-white shells, and I think maybe there'll be more space to explore too. It's so free,
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite free, but I think the power level is there for the potential downside of having a tap land when you don't.
Yeah, I figured it would be a 1-off in those decks, but now we see it as a 2-off, which I can't really see it being more than a 2-off. And I also like the way it works with, for example, Accumulated Knowledge. Basically, the later the game goes, the crazier the card gets, because when you get into these grindy matches, drawing a really high impact spell, like could be Accumulated Knowledge, could be Terminus, or even setting up your counter battles, that's just such a big thing. I guess you gotta hope that you don't actually draw into them, so you can still fetch them. I just realized you can also get them back for days, but you don't really want a player comes into play tapped land for days, so that's not really something I expect to see in other decks.
Well, it's untapped if you play as your 4th land, but I agree, it doesn't really work in Daze shells. Like maybe there could be a Daze Mentor shell out there, but I would have to see it first. But yeah, since we already started on the topic, let's start talking Thrones of Eldraine. I think this is a really, really powerful set. For Standard, it's just ridiculous. Every card is like a whole story, which fits the flavor of the set really well, because it's like kind of Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So we've talked about some of the cards, but some of the cards weren't spoiled when we discussed it last episode. So let's go through, I think, what we think are the biggest hits. So I think Mystic Sanctuary is one of them. My other pick for the best card from the set is Once Upon a Time, which is 1 and a green for an instant. Look at the top 5. You may put a creature or land, reveal it, and put it in your hand. And if it's the first spell you cast, it's free. And so I immediately thought about Dark Depths, and I put 4 in, and I cut some lands and some of the fringe spells for it. And the reason that it's good is because in your opening hand, it pretty much gets a land. Like you play 28 lands or 26 lands now, you're just not going to miss. And then in the late game, it really helps mitigate flood because a lot of games with Dark Depths, you would just draw too many lands and flood out, but this mitigates that by a lot. It also has some extra utility because you can fetch your Sylvan Safekeepers, Dark Confidants, or Fairy Macabres. So I'm really excited about this card.
Yeah, I remember Frank Karsten actually wrote an article about the card on Channel Fireball, and I don't remember the exact words he used, but he basically said that this card is going to change deck building forever in any format that's going to be legal, because it's going to have such a huge impact, because it will barely ever miss. And like you mentioned, it can also provide that late game power where instead of drawing to like pockets of lands, you get to once upon a time for a relevant spell, or at least like a relevant land. And yeah, I can definitely see this card. It's just like my problem with it is, I immediately, even though I feel the deck is not very well positioned right now, I think about it, hey, what could it do in elves? And I wouldn't have like room for that. But in depth, that's a deck that definitely sticks out to me where I would want it. But that's the obvious pick, right? Which other legacy decks right now could you see this going into?
Oops, all spells. Oh wait, no, we don't play lands.
I guess you can find what's it called, Undercity Informer or something like that to end it.
Well, it finds you your mana or your win condition, yeah. So, and you're not.
It's actually not that bad if you think about it. You can find like a Spirit Guide or your win condition.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think it actually makes the deck better.
When you get 2 in your opening hand, that's kind of problematic, because then you actually have to cast one of them.
It doesn't fix the problem of the deck. Yeah. No, yeah, I think this card is almost like, I'm surprised they printed it, because historically it's free spells have been too much, and in Modern, spells for 1 mana with this effect have been kind of considered ridiculous. So now they have a potentially free one that it just seems ultra powerful. And I don't think anybody. I think this is the point where we're looking at the decks that it's really obvious, such as Depths. Like, it obviously does good things in Depths. But I think it has the potential to be a broken card if somebody figures out some sort of combo that would want this effect.
Yeah, like people are doing it in Modern right now with the Neoform deck, I guess. We already mentioned that last cast that could play this card, I guess. Even though I'm not still fully convinced that the Neoform deck is an actual real contender in Modern. Like, people bring it up all the time. I actually played it a little bit, but I don't really see it putting up results.
Hey Julian, I'm trying it, and I've just I love those Grizzlebrand decks in Modern. I don't know why, they just scratch like a weird itch for me. So if it's broken, I'll let you know.
Oh, okay, awesome. I'm also looking for a new Modern deck to play, so maybe that. Like, to me, when it comes to Modern, I want to play the most broken, busted shit that there is. So I'm on Team Grizzlebrand for Modern, for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, Neobrand's probably the most quote-unquote broken deck in Modern, but the best deck is probably like some Urza deck, possibly with like Paradoxical Outcome. So there's a lot of crazy things happening in Modern right now, but we're a legacy podcast, so let's stay on topic. Why don't we kind of go through and each talk about a couple different cards that we think might be, good in from Thrones of Eldraine. I want to touch on one more card that saw play in the Legacy Challenge. Basically a Grixis Delver player, Fish Duggery, got 22nd with 1 Drown in the lock in the main deck, and it is a blue and a black instant. You counter target spell with CMC less than the number of cards in their graveyard, or destroy target creature with CMC less than or equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. So this is a super versatile card. I don't love it in Delver. I like it much more in like a Snapcaster Shell, because I guess once you get Snapcaster and 2 mana, this card is just so versatile.
Yeah, that certainly looks playable, right? It's gotta go into some kind of, I guess, bug or even Esper control shell, but kind of nice that you don't really have the problem that you have with counter spells otherwise, where you either connect with them, or if you miss your window of opportunity and you're behind on board, then you can either leave those counter spells up again, but now you can actually kill their stuff. So usually when you print versatile spells in Legacy, the problem is that versatility comes at a cost, which is decreased power level. But I think here the power level is still high enough to actually see play. I'm just wondering which decks this card would actually go into. Basically
the blue-black Snapcaster decks, and this person played it in Delver as well, so I think it's not great, but it's playable, and maybe the upside of the versatility will mean that it is good, but I'm still somewhat skeptical of that.
I mean, as a one-of and a control shell, I mean, it seems fine, but the downside here, there's a lot of downside. I mean, it does nothing sometimes. It costs 2 mana for a counterspell, which is barely playable in Legacy, and 2 mana for a removal spell. Similarly, a removal spell for a Delver or whatever, right? You can't even kill. No, yeah, There's Tyrant Scorn, I think, is much better than this if you're going to play a 2-mana flexible card.
The main downside to this card is that sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to do, whereas a card like Tyrant Scorn, yeah, it's also somewhat overcosted, but it always does what you're trying to do with that slot. Like, it always kills a Tarmogoyf or a Merit Lodge, so it always fills the role, whereas this card has more versatility, but then, like, to your point, you know, you play against Show and Tell, you don't always get a counter Show and Tell, and then you're like, why am I playing this card?
Another card that people talked about that I feel also doesn't really make the cut as a counterspell is Mystical Dispute, which is an instant for 2 colorless and a blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, so basically mana leak, and it costs 2 less to play if it targets a blue spell. So it's kind of like Pyroblast, but it can't really destroy permanents, and it also doesn't really hard counter, so I'm not really sure. Also it's a blue, so it's unlike so. Basically, it's a Pyroblast that you don't need to splash red for, I guess. But I think it's the problem is you can't really kill that Chases, can't kill that Delvers.
Yeah, I mean it's mostly like you play Pyroblast also to kill Jace. So yeah, I don't see it at all. Eric, do you see any cards that you think are either good or you like?
Basically, the ones you mentioned, the Land, Mystic Sanctuary, and Once Upon a Time are the 2 that seem definitely playable and real to an extent. The card Oko, probably not playable in Legacy, but it definitely does a lot more than I originally thought it did, because I played against it in Limited, and I don't know, the first time I read it, I didn't quite realize how ridiculous that card is at 3 mana, but that's probably not good enough for Legacy still.
Yeah, I agree. When you're casting like blue CMC 3 mana spells, it's like there's so many insane options. Like there's True Name Nemesis, basically is the main one, but then there's also stuff like, you know, something like Back to Basics locks your opponent out of the game completely. Something like Narset like locks your opponent out of the game and gets you 2 cards. So like the bar is just very high.
Yeah, and this one takes like you can make a 3/3 after 2 turns. It's not good enough for Legacy, but it's definitely better than I originally thought.
Well, let's talk about cards who we think are good enough. I think Charming Prince is definitely good enough in humans. So that's kind of a like it's a 2-mana 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you can gain 3 life or scry 2. And there was one more mode.
It flickers a creature on your own side. It's like a flicker rest for your creatures.
So that could be really useful for like reflickering your Thalia's lieutenants, protecting your creatures. So yeah, I think this card is pretty powerful. It's definitely going to see play in humans, possibly Death and Taxes. And the gain 3 life is super relevant against a deck like Dark Depths, where you just need to go above 20, and then your sorcery speed removal becomes turned on, and it's just that much harder to win.
I actually think it's definitely playable in Death and Taxes for 2 reasons. A lot of the times you just want to flicker your own creatures anyway, and so I don't think it would replace Flicker Wisp, but at 2 mana, flickering your own creature with like a Stoneforge Mystic, or to protect a creature, or to tutor one of your tutor creatures, that's very good. But also the Scry. The Scry is really good in Death and Taxes, because Death and Taxes is often looking for certain things or just lands or whatever.
Yeah, Bob wasn't really convinced of the Scry when Travis and I were praising it as like being good enough to make this card playable. And I remember Travis also mentioned a mode of Charming Prince is if you get 2 of them, you can basically establish this engine where for humans, for example, where you can keep getting comes into play triggers, which is relevant for Thalia's Lieutenant. But yeah, I think that's more something that we probably see in Modern, not in Legacy.
And the gain 3 is not irrelevant because Depths is a deck, and you have Wastelands and Ports and Caracases, and so it takes quite a bit for the Depths decks to... I mean, I've heard people say Depths is a bad matchup, so Depths is a good matchup for D&T, but regardless of either of those, this card does something against Depths.
Okay, yeah, I forgot we actually talked about it with Jarvis, so... yeah, definitely think this card is going to see play. Julian, did you have one in mind that you wanted to talk about too?
Yeah, the only one that I actually added to the Google Doc, which I felt was probably going to see play, actually I saw it seeing play on Twitch at least, is Deafening Silence. It's enchantment for a white. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-creature spell each turn. So it's kind of similar to Aether's One Canonist in the decks that want this kind of effect, except for that it's 1 mana less. And I guess that makes it playable. Like, I'm really not a big fan of the card because I feel overall it's kind of underpowered. And it also, if you have green, it competes with Veil of Summer. So I'm really not too high on this card, but I wanted to mention it because I do see people playing it. And it does give you a turn 1 out when playing Death and Taxes. The downside, of course, is you can't protect it with Mother of Runes. And I think that's almost putting me into the camp of wanting either one canonists. But I can see if you have a deck with Thalia or maybe even a Phyrexian Revoker, which can stop some combos, that you really want that turn 1 effect as well.
Well, so let's think about this card in the context of two different decks. First of all, Death and Taxes. Second of all, like a blue-white deck. So in context of Death and Taxes, obviously this card is insane against Storm. It seems pretty good against Reanimator as well. Obviously, it's not going to, necessarily win you the game, but it could slow them down by a lot, and sometimes that's all you need. And then in terms of against the other combo decks, like against Sneak and Show, it doesn't do that much against them. Like it could make Omniscience slower, I guess, but I just don't see it being that good against Sneak and Show. And then against Depths, yeah, they like barely care. They just cast one spell a turn anyways. So I don't think it's like necessarily relevant enough. Eric,
it also does nothing against Elves, pretty much.
I mean, yeah, this card doesn't excite me. This effect has been printed so many times, it costs 1 less, but it also doesn't attack. So, I mean, yeah, I think it will see some play, but it's not something to get excited about. But I do think the one place where I think Bob is about to start talking about is in a blue-white deck. A lot of the times, those decks, when Storm is popular, will run Canonist, and this card is certainly going to be better in those decks because of Snapcaster Mage.
Wait, does this card work with Snapcaster Mage? It doesn't, right?
It does, because it says non-creature spell, so the Snapcaster Mage doesn't count towards the limit.
Oh, okay.
So you don't turn off your Snapcaster.
Cool, I wasn't even going for that, but what I was going for was that the fact that basically in the Sneak and Show matchup, then your Force of Wills are the final word because they go Show and Tell, you go Force of Will, and that's over. So, I mean, I think this card definitely has potential. I'm not sure if it's going to become a sideboard staple or if it's going to be like not played at all, but I could definitely see it, being playable.
I think it'll be very good in a blue-white Blade deck for as you mentioned, because Canonist is already really good at doing that. Like they cast Show and Tell, and you just let it. You can, if they're playing Omnitel, you can just put in your Canonist and then like disenchant their and so you have that. But this now it's 1 mana, so you would play Canonist if you're playing Canonist in a blue-white deck. You're usually also playing Snapcaster Mage, just so you still get to use your Snapcatchers, which is pretty big when you're playing against combo decks.
Okay, I like it. Another card I wanted to touch on. There's not too many more cards I want to talk about, but I think I want to talk about 2 more cards. One is Bone Crusher Giant, and 2 is Emery Lurker of the Loch. So first one I want to talk about is Bone Crusher Giant. It's one of those adventure cards. So the instant side is 1 and a red for deal 2 damage to any target, and then damage can't be prevented this turn. And then the creature side is 2 and a red for a 4/3. Whenever it becomes targeted, it deals 2 damage to the spell's controller. And the reason I like this card, I kind of like this card as a flex slot, potentially in Blue-Red Delver or in Rug Delver, because it's kind of an answer to True Name Nemesis, where like if you attack with a Tarmogoyf and then they block with a True Name, you can just deal 2 to something. And then because damage won't be prevented by protection, the True Name will finally die. So the other thing I like about this card is its card advantage in Delver, so like you get to kill something and then play a threat. So I think this card is a little bit expensive, but has some extra utility and its card advantage. So I think as like a one-of in Delver, that's where I could see it being played.
It's actually kind of cute, the interaction that you mentioned, where you basically use it to, for example, shoot a Delver, and then their True Name Nemesis dies in combat because the damage can't be prevented. That's something I actually didn't think about immediately. And then after all of it, you finally get your 4/3, which I guess is a nice bonus. It's kind of expensive. Maybe it's even going to be a thing, and I don't even know. And people like me, I think about Moonstomp immediately. They're like, hey, if everything goes wrong, at least we can have a 4/3 on the first turn. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the metagame changes, right now there's a lot of Tarmogoyfs, so this card's not great. But if the metagame changes such that there's like a lot of X2s again, then I think this card is pretty strong. But for now, I think the card is not that good, but it's still playable.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's a little underpowered. It's a little overcosted. I think it's kind of cool though, but I think it will not see play in any Delver decks because the fact that it's overcosted is pretty big, and you can't target an opponent for the 2 damage, and that True Name thing basically proved to be unimportant. I mean, people have played. There was another card
that was Wild Slash, but it required you to have a creature with 4 power, so that was just like a lot more to ask for. Whereas this card just kills True Name.
Well, not if you're already trying to. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't just kill True Name. You have to.
Yeah.
They have to be blocking with it. You can't. I mean, I guess they could attack.
You can't block though.
If they have a Delver out and you have a Tarmogoyf.
So you can't block. So yeah, they have to be blocking.
Yeah. So
no, you're right. It's probably just not quite there in terms of stopping True Name. Like it can happen, but.
And then and for Moon Stompy, I think it's just too low impact to
we have better goblins, right?
It. I mean,
yeah,
right. Maybe in the red Eldrazi deck though, because they play Punishing Fire, and I played that deck and I found the Punishing Fire engine to not be like all that great, but like 2 damage sometimes would be good, and I think a 4/3 would be a better follow up than like buying back your Punishing Fire in most matchups. So maybe in that deck.
I mean, that deck is already an abomination in itself. I don't know. I can't take that deck seriously. It looks so stupid. I don't know if you play the deck. You probably play it for a reason. I have never played it. I only played against it, and it looks like people can't make up their mind. They want to be a Chunt deck. No, they want to be a Eldrazi deck. No, they want to be a Moon deck. No, you're a Giant deck.
It's mono red Eldrazi. It's like mono white Eldrazi, but it's mono red Eldrazi.
Yeah, mono white Eldrazi. By the way, we talked about the Legacy Premier League, but the Legacy Unchained is still going on. And I think Eric, you and I think 2 more people are still in contention for the win. And the mono white Eldrazi deck, I think, thus far has proven next to Elves as the best deck in the Legacy Unchained League that we've played thus far.
Elves, really?
I have final statistics. Yeah, Elves is 5-0 by now.
That's crazy.
How's Pox? Wait a minute. But I'm the only. You know why? It's because the good decks are the ones that were already been tuned and built before. So like even my Pox deck did better than most of the brews that people came up with the banned cards.
So is what you're saying, Eric? Kind of. Yeah, we have some of the brightest minds playing Legacy Unchained, but like, if these cards were actually unbanned. Unbanned, like more people would brew with them, and they would probably, end up in better versions than you guys are playing with.
Yeah, because I mean, I know my deck building was not very. I didn't spend that much time deck building, and some of my lists were pretty bad.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure that we misbuilt Mind's Desire quite a lot, because Mind's Desire should probably be better than, I think it's sitting at 4 and 7 or something. And obviously, it's also playing against other really good decks, but I expected Mind's Desire to do much better than that. And whenever I played the list, like basically the standard list that most people played in the tournament, it felt a bit clunky and not that great. I think there's a really good Mind's Desire build out there that we just haven't discovered yet. But I've been saying that a lot about the deck.
Okay, so then let's talk about last card I wanted to talk about is Emry, Lurker of the Lot. It is 2 and a blue for a 1/2 legend. It has affinity. And then you can tap it to play an artifact from your graveyard. And also when it ETB, you mill 4 cards. So this card is seeing a ton of hype in Modern, and I think it definitely has potential in Legacy as well. Possibly, there's 2 shells I'm thinking about. One is just maybe a outcome shell similar to the Modern build, and 2 is in Blue-White Bomberman, where it basically is like an enabler for like 1 mana, that finds you your combo pieces and is card advantage with the baubles afterwards. So Blue-White Bomberman and maybe some Paradoxical Outcome deck. The big challenge for Paradoxical Outcome in Legacy is that it's blue, and so everybody has Red Blast. So
is that really the big challenge for the deck?
I mean, I guess there's a couple challenges. It's just the combo decks are much better in Legacy, so maybe that's the other big challenge. There's also Chalice on 0, which is going to be good against it. So, yeah, maybe just Blue-White Bomberman then. I'm not sure. I think, what
my big problem with Paradoxical Outcome Legacy is? That there's not really any good mana artifacts that you can bounce. Because when you play the deck in Vintage, you realize most of the power comes from being able to replay all your stuff and getting so much mana. And in Legacy, what do you have, a 4-mana Thran Dynamo?
You basically, you have to bounce cards like Grim Monolith, Mox Opal, Mox Amber. I know Modern can support those. Legacy, it'll be a little dicier. But, yeah, I mean, I see your point.
I mean, I want the deck to be good because Paradoxical Outcome is a lot of fun. But I guess once it actually becomes good, it's probably too good for Legacy. But
that's the problem with that card.
Yeah, I would love to break this card. I look at this card and I feel like maybe I can break it for all of Legacy or something. I probably can't because I don't really have the time to do that, or maybe even the mental capacity to do it. But I love the card. We talked about it last cast with Jarvis, and we all agreed that it has a lot of potential. And I also heard other people say that this is a card you really can't sleep on, because once it becomes good and once people figure out what to do with it, it's gonna be big.
I mean, it's a 1-mana 1/2 that generates value. That's kind of insane. The main one downside I see is it's actually not even a downside, because if it's a 1-mana 1/2 that mills 4, if they Karakas it, you don't really care. You're just you'll just cast your 1-mana mill spell again. and every turn you need to lock down their Caracas, otherwise you're going to like start generating value. So actually, it's like a legendary creature that's like not even that bad against Caracas. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely think it's like the power level of the card is really high. The downside is you need to play like zeros in your deck, which is pretty weak to Chalice. But I could definitely see like a blue-white Bomberman shell that splashes for this card, and it gets another power boost, basically.
Yeah, it's also basically a 1-mana card most of the time that taps for card advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be something that you play in blue-white mid-range decks, but yeah, there's not really too many artifacts you would really want to play out of your graveyard, unless you put like bubbles. That's the obvious approach, right? You put a lot of bubbles into your deck and do the Bomberman thing that you mentioned. Yeah, maybe you should try that. Maybe somebody should actually try that. But you can't really play it too early in Bomberman, right?
It could also be a mono-blue painter. There's mono-blue painter decks out there that are reasonable already, and this could fit into one of those shells.
So basically what I'm saying is I hope somebody goes ahead and kind of breaks this in silence, and then I can pick it up and play it in China, and then that's going to be it.
Honestly, yeah, that's been my big thing is like, I'm busier now, and I just don't have that much time to test. Like, for this GP, I think I played... Well, I guess my friends were over, so it was a little bit different. But even if they weren't here, I think I would have played like 1 or 2 leagues with my list. Whereas I remember years ago, I would play like 20 leagues before like, getting ready for the GP. So I don't know. I think I just, it's hard to have that much time to like try different things.
Yeah, tell me about it, right? LPL, oh my god, I told you before, right? Like the last month, that was eating up pretty much all of my free time and don't really get to play that much Magic. I still do. And I'll get to play a lot more Magic soon. It's kind of funny, right? When we produce these leagues, my work is like 80% before the league and then only 20% during the league. So I actually get to relax a little bit almost. And I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens come Wednesday.
Oh, me too. I'm so excited for it. I hope everything goes right and we're going to have some awesome matches. So, with that, where can people find your awesome matches on Twitch? Bob, you mentioned that you are streaming more again, and you also got in some streams recently.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at twitter.com/grizzlepuff. Twitch is the same, twitch.tv/grizzlepuff. I plan on streaming twice a week when I get back from my vacation in Japan. So basically, starting late October, I'm going to stream at least twice a week, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. And Eric, I was going to say you're still streaming. I fully expect you to be still streaming full time.
Yes, I am. So I'm on twitch.tv/EWLandon, and I'm there almost every day of the week, Monday through Friday, during the day, Pacific time.
Awesome, guys. So, and if you want to find more of my stuff, you can hit me up at twitter.com/itsjulian23 or twitch.tv/itsjulian. This is also the channel where we're going to stream the Legacy Premier League. And if you want to support the running of the show, you can do that by heading to patreon.com/everydayeternal, where you can become one of our Patreons. Just like this week, we get another Benjamin joining us, as well as Kylie, who are both supporting us on the Delver tier, as well as our Eternal Witness supporters, Matt and James, and of course our Grizzlebrand tier supporters, Bachu, Scott, Korosh, and Jeremy. I still don't know why I named it the Grizzlebrand tier. Like, I'm known for not liking Grizzlebrand, but I mean, it's the most powerful creature in Legacy right now, right? I guess. So yeah, thank you all for that. Thanks for coming on, guys. And see you all again soon, I hope, for the stream on Wednesday. I hope you are going to be there.
Awesome, thanks.
Awesome. Bye-bye.